Hello, sixth graders. This is Mrs. McDougall. Hope you're having a great day. Just want to remind you to make sure that you go into Schoology and do attendance for yourself. And we're going to get started with Chapter 6 today. The land changes hands, and this chapter is all about treaties that were formed between the U.S. government and the Ojibwe and Dakota tribes. We're going to start out by looking at our Chapter 6E book, and let's start out with this video to get an overview of what we'll talk about.
This is St. Paul, Minnesota's capital. It's a big city with skyscrapers and hundreds of thousands of people. But travel back to the early 1800s, and what do you think St. Paul looked like? This was St. Paul in 1845. Minnesota wasn't a state yet, but the U.S. government wanted this land for thousands of settlers moving west. Many European Americans saw this land as a place of opportunity, a new place to start a farm, log the forest, or begin a business. But the land didn't belong to them. It belonged to the Dakota and the Ojibwe. This land had been their home for centuries. In 1805, the U.S. government started making written agreements, or treaties, with the Dakota and Ojibwe so it could have some of the land in Minnesota. Often these agreements were unfair to American Indians. Many didn't want to give up their land.
You're coming and asking me for my country. Makes me sad.
Others felt they had no choice. The U.S. government was powerful, and more settlers were arriving each year. For the Dakota, their way of life was changing.
The powder in our rifles is wet. It will not burn. We kill no game. Nothing.
Trading their land would bring money that would help the Dakota survive. In 1851, treaties with the Dakota opened millions of acres for farmers and loggers. Right away, thousands of European Americans rushed into southern and western Minnesota to start new lives. The Dakota were forced to move to 2 reservations along the Minnesota River. In 1858, Minnesota became a state. Over the next few decades, the United States signed more treaties with the Ojibwe to gain access to northern Minnesota. Most Dakota and Ojibwe now lived on the reservations guaranteed to them by the treaties. Life had changed for everyone, some for the better, for others for the worse. Think about the land where you live. Do you know who it belonged to in the early 1800s?
So we're going to start with the introduction, and in the textbook it begins on page 99, but in the ebook, obviously, it's in Chapter 6. The United States was a young nation that was growing quickly and desired more land. During the mid-1800s, it acquired millions of acres of land from the Minnesota, Dakota, and Ojibwe. Land changed hands through a series of written agreements called treaties. We'll talk about how life was drastically changed for those that were connected to the land. Oopsie. The treaties between the American Indian nations and the United States was complicated because the balance of power was not equal at all. Both sides knew that the United States was more powerful. It had more money, people, more military power than individual American Indian nations, and as a result, most treaties favored the U.S. government at the expense of American Indian nations. So how did this all happen? One of the Army, what was he? An Army officer, Zebulon Pike, was sent by the U.S. government to Minnesota, and he was tasked with the job of getting some land and setting up a fort. So he wanted to set up a treaty with the Dakota on 2 different pieces of land, one being at the site where Fort Snelling was built, and another at the confluence of the St. Croix River and the Mississippi River. It was not a really great deal at all for the Dakota people. In fact, it was an area, these areas were known as Badote, which were confluences where rivers came together, and they were sacred lands for the Dakota. They felt rather forced into it, but they did agree to this treaty, and that is one of those locations is Fort Snelling. Fort Snelling, the main job of having this fort was actually to enforce the United States laws related to the fur trade. They also wanted to make sure that they could keep disagreements down between the Dakota and the Ojibwe people and make sure that the business of the fur trade was going smoothly. Actually, there was an individual, Lawrence Taliaferro, who was an Indian agent, and he was really quite respectful of the Dakota, and often the fur traders were trying to get rid of him. He was an Indian agent that was meant to support and help the Indian population. The location of Fort Snelling was really terrific in terms of a good location for looking out for British soldiers. It also provided excellent protection from attacks, and people could see both directions of the rivers, anyone traveling on them. So it was a valuable location for both the Native Americans and the American government. There are some terms that are important to understand as we talk about this. A treaty, of course, we've discussed throughout the year, but a written agreement between two or more nations. An annuity is a payment of either money or food or equipment or supplies that the U.S. government paid to American Indians as part of their trade, the treaty agreement for their land. And reservation is a term for land that is set aside from the U.S. government to be used by any American Indian group. It's reserved for that group in exchange for land. Now we know that there were reasons for people wanting these treaties. For the fur traders, of course, they knew that the fur trade was ending and they wanted to be paid back for the loans of money that they'd given to the American Indians that had been borrowing on credit. The U.S. government, of course, wanted to expand the United States across North America, and American settlers could not move onto this land unless the Indians sold it, and they were anxious to begin their new lives. Missionaries believed that the treaties could help the Indians learn some new ways of survival around the European Americans, and they believed that they were actually helping them by teaching them how to farm and live a more European American way, even though that wasn't necessarily what the Native Americans wanted. And of course, the American Indians did not want these treaties, but they were basically forced to sign them. Many of them didn't really even know what they were signing because they didn't speak or read English, and the agreements that they thought they were agreeing to were not upheld. As we talk about treaties being signed between two independent nations, I want to talk about sovereignty. The idea of a sovereign nation is a nation of people who are self-ruling and independent. So the Ojibwe, Dakota, and many other nations have independent tribal governments that are called sovereign or separate from the United States government. So I think you're going to look at these maps and find it startling. We know that Americans could only live in the land that was bought by the U.S. government. I should say European Americans. Sorry about that. The rest of the land, of course, belonged to the Dakota and the Ojibwe. So in 1805, if you look at this map, you can see that the southern part of Minnesota is mostly considered Dakota land, the northern part mostly Ojibwe. There's a small portion that is considered Ho-Chunk or Winnebago down here. And then in 1805, right where you imagine Minneapolis, St. Paul area, that's where Fort Snelling is. So people, most of the European Americans who lived on this land were just soldiers and fur traders. As we move through time, 1837 or so, you can see that the brown area is where the European Americans came to farm and start businesses. But now as Minnesota becomes a territory in 1849, they are hoping to bring more and more people into this area, this territory, so that it can eventually become a state. So pressured by traders and threatened with military force, the Dakota were forced to cede or give up nearly all of their land in Minnesota and eastern Dakota in 1851 treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota. So if you look at the amount of land that was given up compared to what it had been in 1805, it's a tremendous amount of land that is no longer theirs. And they were expected to live in this narrow strip along the Minnesota River. Minnesota becomes a state in 1858, but this is a map of what 1863's population looked like. So these areas would be considered Ojibwe Reservation, and Dakota Reservation had at one point been this stretch right here, but over time they had been forced to give even half of this land back to the U.S. government. So you can just see these small little pink dots. Those are Dakota community. There's an interactive activity that we will supply you with and do with you soon, so you can see how the Dakota were pressured into signing these treaties. The exchange that they were to receive would be reservation land, some annuity payments, and then they were expected to give up all of the land that they had farmed and hunted on, and they were forced to leave that and not leave the reservation land. All right, more information will be coming about Chapter 7 next. Thanks, everyone.